Welcome back to this video series of C++ programming. This is the lecture 3 of this video series, and today we are going to talk about classes and objects in C++. What is class? Class is used to define the nature or properties of an object. So it is one entity that holds the different properties. Class is similar to a structure in C where different elements can be grouped together. The object is an instance of a class. So when you create an object of that particular class, it holds all the properties of that class. Class is a logical abstraction, but an object has a physical existence. So we'll talk about this point later in this video. To understand the classes and objects, take this example. When you talk about this apple, a fruit, what kind of different questions come to your mind? First thing, apple is a fruit. Then apple has all the properties like name, color, taste, shape, and these properties belongs to a fruit. Apart from an apple, banana is also a fruit and it has all the properties like a name, color, taste, and shape. So both apple and banana comes under a category of a fruit. How can we relate this example with the classes and objects? So here fruit can be related to a classes. So fruit is one class. Then apple and banana can be considered as an object. So they are object of this class called as a fruit. So when you create an object, so for example this apple or banana, it holds all the properties. So this is how object and classes can be related. Let's understand the syntax of a class. Syntax of a class starts with the keyword called as a class. Class is a standard C++ keyword. What follows after this keyword is the name of a class. Then the content of class goes inside these two curly brackets, and then the class ends with this semicolon. So inside this class, the different elements can be specified. So elements can be variables, they can be functions. But when you specify these variables, they are called as a data members or members variables in C++. And when you create these functions, they are called as a member functions, or they can also be called as a methods or procedures. But remember these two terms, data member and member functions. Then you can see these three different things here called as access specifiers in C++. Private, protected, and public. These are the three standard C++ access specifiers. And the default access specifier is a private. So if you don't specify any access specifier in the class, then the default becomes a private. So what is this private, protected, and public? The private access specifiers, when you use the private access specifiers, all the members inside the private access specifiers become private to that particular class. So they cannot be accessed outside the class. And they can be accessed by only the public and protected members of that class. So when you create an object of the class, you cannot directly access the private members. You have to use the public member functions to get these private members. But protected and public, we'll talk about protected when we talk about the concept of inheritance in C++. But now we'll talk about the public only. The members within the public can be accessed outside the class. If you create an object of the class in any other function or any other part of a program, then you can directly access those public members through that object. So unlike private, they are not restricted to that particular class. They can be accessed outside the class using the object. And then this is object list. So it is optional to specify the object list here after this end curly bracket. And if you provide this object list here, then it creates or it declares the object of that class. Now let's take an example and understand more about the classes and objects in C++. So here I have created a new project and created a new file source.cpp. First, write an entry function. Then I will add a iostream header file to provide a support to input-output operations. And this using namespace std to resolve the cout and cout object. We create one class here. To create a class, as we discussed, you have to first specify this keyword class followed with the name of the class. So I will create one class called a fruit, and then these two curly brackets, and the class ends with the semicolon. Inside this class we'll create different members. So first we'll create a data members, that is variables, and I will specify them in a private access specifier. So first I will create a name, but since it is a name, I will specify the array of character. So I have created three data members here. The one holds the name, another holds the shape, and another holds the color. And these are the three different types. Class holds the different elements together. One is a character, another is an integer, then another is a character. Similarly, you can add other elements of a different types like float or anything. Then I will create some public members here. So I created one member function inside the class, valid to define the function within a class. So unlike C programs, where if you consider this as relate this as a structure in C, in the C it is not possible to create a functions within a structure. But in the classes, it is completely allowed to create a function. So I have created this function, and what I'm doing is I'm calling this function to set a name. Call this function and will pass argument as the string, so it will be stored into this character pointer, and then we can use uh, this character pointer to store into this variable called as a name. So for that, I will write one function that will copy the string. This will copy the string from this pointer n into this destination variable called as a name. And this is a standard C++ strcpy function. To use this function, I have to first specify the library header file. This C string is a header file that contains the definition of this or declaration of this strcpy function. And here's prefix C in this tree string file stands for the C program. So this header file is a part of a C programming. So if you want to include any header file which is a part of C, you should specify the C and then the name of that header file. And then you don't have to specify the .h extension as we discussed in the previous lecture. The members which comes under a private access specifier are called as a private data members or private member functions. Not only these data members, but also you can add the member functions inside the private access specifier. Similarly, the members which comes under a public access specifier are called as a public members. If it is a data, then they are called as a data members, and if it is function, then they are called as a member functions or public member functions. Another point to understand about these classes is the order of this access specifier is not fixed in the C++. You don't have to specify this as access specifier in a particular order. That means you can specify the public before a private or the public after a private or then protected after the private or after public. So that order is not fixed. Then we had talked about one point in the slide 2, that is a class is a logical abstraction but an object has a physical existence. Let's understand the meaning of that statement here. When you say the class has a logical abstraction, that means when you create a class, it becomes just a declaration. That means the actual memory is not allocated to a class. So if you create these members or the data members, then the memory is not allocated to these members. The memory is allocated only when if you create the object of that class. That means when you create an object, it actually becomes a physical, it actually physically exists. So that's why object has a physical existence. Another point is You cannot define the variables within a class. If you do like this, so if you are assigning the value 20 to this variable, then it is not allowed. And the reason is the class is a just a logical abstraction. So the memory is not actually allocated unless you create an object. So you cannot define any variable within a class. This is how we created a class. Let's create an object of class. I will create this object inside the main function. To create an object, you have to specify the name of a class. So here fruit is the name of the class, and then the name of that object. Create one object called as an apple. Now with this object, I can access the different elements of the class. To access the element of a class, you have to specify the name of object, then this dot operator, and then you can specify the name of that member within a class. Here, for example, set name, and then this is a function, so I have to provide the this two brackets here, and then the ending with a colon, semicolon. Now this set functions require a parameter as this string. So address of a string. So I will specify one string here. I'll pass the apple as a string. Okay. Now, if I want to access the private members, other members of a this class, then as you can see, I cannot access the other members. I just have access to this only this set name member function. And the reason is, as we already discussed, these are the private members of the class. So they cannot be accessed outside the class. That means even if you create an object, the object is not provided an access to get this private members. Remember, there are the two terms here. One is the visibility and there is accessibility. All the members which are present or declared within the class are visible outside the class, but only the public members are accessible outside the class, or the protected members if you are using the inheritance. That is, if you derive the another class from the base class. But the private members are not accessible outside the class, and that's why when you create an object and try to and specify the dot operator, then you can see only set name here. Rather, I will create one function here that will display the name of this fruit onto a computer screen on the console window. Set get name or display name. So this function will display the content of this variable name onto a console window. And then since this is a public member function, I can call this with the object. First, this function will set the name as apple, and then we are displaying that name onto a console window. Now here, as you can see, the compiler is not able to resolve this string apple. Well, the reason is, as you can see, the argument of type character const is not compatible with the parameter type of character star. That means the string is of a constant character, so we cannot modify the string. But here we have just specified the character in. So there's a parameter mismatch. So set a constant here so that uh, the string won't get modified. Okay. We created a class, then we created the object, and we saw how to access the different elements of the class using that object. So let's compile the program and see. It's giving one error, strcpy. This function or variable may be unsafe. Consider using the strcpy instead. So in C++, expect you to use this strcpy dot s function instead of the strcpy. So let's build again. Now it compiled successfully without any error. So let's run the program. As you can see, it is displaying the name as apple. Alright, that's great. So this is what we are expecting from the program. So we are passing the string as apple and we are displaying the same. So we should display the same string onto a console window. So great. So you created the program that deals with the classes and objects. Another point here is you can create more than the single object in a program. I can create an object of the same class and I will call this as a banana. So this can also be specified like this. So you can specify the object here. So apple and banana, then they have become a type of this uh, fruit. So fruit is one type. Now it is a class, though it is called as a type. And this variable, now they becomes user defined variables and they are of a type fruit. I will follow this style here. So it's better to create the objects or variables in the different lines. So now what happens when you create these two different variables? As we saw earlier, when you create an object, the memory is allocated to that particular class. So till now the class was just a declaration, and when you create an object, the actual memory is allocated and all these member variables enter into a one section of the memory, and that is the data memory. Similarly, these member functions are stored into a program memory. But when you create a multiple objects, then the same or the different copies of this data members is created for each object. So now apple has the three data members associated and the separate memory is allocated to three these different members. Similarly, these three different members are also associated with the object called as a banana, and the separate memory is allocated for these three different members related to the banana. So that is very important point. So now similar to this apple object, you can access the same elements of the class using this banana object. Create two statements here, and what I just have to do is replace this apple object with the banana object, and then I can call this set name and a display name functions. So here I'll specify the another string as a banana. I'll compile this program and let's see what it outputs. Now it is displaying these two strings, the apple and a banana. So you can easily understand that now this name is different for the apple and a banana, and that's why it is displaying the two different outputs, even though we are using the same function and the same variable name. Now we have covered all the different points related to this classes and objects. We created a class, we created the objects, and then we saw how to access the different elements of that class through that object. But why do we need this access specifiers in a class? So by default, the access specifier is a private, but then why do you specify the public, private, and a protected? The reason is it is one of the very important feature of a C++, and that is called as an encapsulation. With the data encapsulation, you provide additional security to your program. That means when you specify this private access specifier, you strictly says your data members cannot be accessed outside the class. And that is more security, isn't it? You cannot access these elements through this any other function in the program, and then there is a less possibility that these elements can get corrupted. That is the problem of this shared variable in a C. If you create any shared variable in C programming, then that variable can be accessed by different functions or different models, and there are more chances of the corruption. So with this private access specifier, you are eliminating those chances of getting the data corrupted. Let's talk about some of the points about the classes and objects. The first thing, non-static data member variables cannot be initialized inside the class. So as we discussed, we cannot initialize these variables, data members variables inside the class. And finally, no data members can be declared as auto, extern, or a register. These data members cannot be of a type auto or extern or register. So if you specify something here, then it is not allowed in the C++ or inside the C++ classes. This is all about these classes and objects. I hope you have understood the concept of classes and objects. So thanks for watching this video and stay tuned for the next video.